It was a dark road, but it led in a new direction. Rearden walked from his mills, not towards his house, but towards the city of Philadelphia. It was a great distance to walk, but he had wanted to do it tonight, as he had done it every evening in the past week. He felt at peace with the empty darkness of the countryside, with nothing but the black shapes of trees around him, with no motion but that of his own body and of branches stirring in the wind, with no lights but the slow sparks of the fireflies flickering through the hedges. The 2 hours between mills and city were his span of rest. He had moved out of his home to an apartment in Philadelphia. He had given no explanation to his mother and Philip. He had said nothing except that he could remain in the house if they wished to do, and that Miss Ives would take care of their bills. He had asked them to tell Lillian when she returned that she was not to attempt to see him. They had stared at him in terrified silence. He had handed his attorney a signed blank check and said, "Get me a divorce, on any grounds and at any cost. I don't care what means you use, how many of their judges you purchase, or whether you find it necessary to stage a frame-up of my wife. Do whatever you wish, but there is to be no alimony and no property settlement." The attorney had looked at him with the hint of a wise, sad smile, as if this were an event he had expected to happen long ago. He had answered, "Okay, Hank, it can be done, but it will take some time. Make it as fast as you can." No one had questioned him about his signature on the gift certificate, but he had noticed that the men at the mills looked at him with a kind of searching curiosity, almost as if they expected to find the scars of some physical torture on his body. He felt nothing but the sense of an even, restful twilight, like a spread of slag over a molten metal when it crusts and swallows the last brilliant spurt of the white glow within. He felt nothing at the thought of the looters who were now going to manufacture Rearden metal. His desire to hold his right to it, and proudly to be the only one to sell it, had been his form of respect for his fellow man, his belief that to trade with them was an act of honor. The belief, the respect, and the desire were gone. He did not care what men made, what they sold, where they bought it, his metal, or whether any of them would know that it had been his. The human shapes moving past him in the streets of the city were physical objects without any meaning. The countryside, with the darkness washing away all the traces of human activity, leaving only an untouched earth, which he had once been able to handle, was real. He carried a gun in his pocket, as advised by the policeman of the radio car that patrolled the roads. They had warned him that no road was safe after dark these days. He felt, with a touch of mirthless amusement, that the gun had been needed at the mills, not in the peaceful safety of loneliness at night. What could some starving vagrant take from him compared to what had been taken by men who claimed to be his protectors? He walked with an effortless speed, feeling relaxed by a form of activity that was natural to him. This was his period of training for solitude, he thought. He had to learn to live without any awareness of people, the awareness that now paralyzed him with revulsion. He had once built his fortune, starting out with empty hands. Now he had to rebuild his life, starting out with an empty spirit. He would give himself a short span of time for the training, he thought, and then he would claim the once incomparable value still left to him, that one desire that had remained pure and whole. He would go to Dagny. 2 commandments had grown in his mind. One was a duty, the other a passionate wish. The first was never to let her learn the reason of his surrender to the looters. The second was to say to her the words which he should have known at their first meeting and should have said on the gallery of Alice Wyatt's house. There was nothing but the strong summer starlight to guide him as he walked, but he could distinguish the highway and the remnant of a stone fence ahead at the corner of a country crossroad. The fence had nothing to protect any longer, only a spread of weeds, a willow tree bending over the road, and farther in the distance the ruin of a farmhouse with the starlight showing through its roof. He walked, thinking that even this sight still retained the power to be of value. It gave him the promise of a long stretch of space, undisturbed by human intrusion. The man who stepped suddenly out into the road must have come from behind the willow tree, but so swiftly that it seemed as if he had sprung from the middle of the highway. Rearden's hand went to the gun in his pocket, but stopped. He knew, by the proud posture of the body standing in the open, by the straight line of the shoulders against the starlit sky, that the man was not a bandit. When he heard the voice, he knew that he was not a beggar. "I should like to speak to you, Mr. Rearden." The voice had the firmness, the clarity, and the special courtesy peculiar to men who are accustomed to giving orders. "Go ahead," said Rearden, "provided you don't intend to ask me for help or money." The man's garments were rough, but efficiently trim. He wore dark trousers and a dark blue windbreaker close tight at his throat, prolonging the lines of his long, slender figure. He wore a dark blue cap, and all that could be seen of him at night were his hands, his face, and a patch of gold blonde hair on his temple. The hands held no weapon, only a package wrapped in burlap, the size of a carton of cigarettes. "No, Mr. Rearden," he said, "I do not intend to ask you for money, but to return it to you." "To return money?" "Yes." "What money?" "A small refund of a very large debt." "Owed by you?" "No, not by me. It is only a token payment, but I want you to accept it as proof that if we live long enough, you and I, every dollar of that debt will be returned to you." "What debt?" "The money that was taken from you by force." He extended the package to Rearden, flipping the burlap open. Rearden saw the starlight run like fire along the mirror-smooth surface. He knew, by its weight and texture, that what he held was a bar of solid gold. He looked from the bar to the man's face, but the face seemed hotter and less revealing than the surface of the metal. "Who are you?" asked Rearden. "The friend of the friendless." "Did you come here to give me this?" "Yes." "Do you mean that you had to stalk me at night on a lonely road in order not to rob me, but to hand me a bar of gold?" "Yes." "Why?" "When robbery is done in open daylight, by the sanction of the law, as it is today, then any act of honor or restitution has to be hidden underground." "What made you think that I'd accept a gift of this kind?" "It is not a gift, Mr. Rearden. It is your own money. But I have one favor to ask of you. It is a request, not a condition, because there can be no such thing as conditional property. This gold is yours, so you are free to use it as you please. But I risked my life to bring it to you tonight, so I am asking as a favor that you save it for the future or spend it on yourself. On nothing but your own comfort or pleasure. Do not give it away, and above all, do not put it into your business." "Why?" "Because I don't want it to be of any benefit to anybody but you. Otherwise, I will have broken an oath taken long ago, as I am breaking every rule I set for myself by speaking to you tonight." "What do you mean?" "I have been collecting this money for you for a long time, but I did not intend to see or tell you about it or to give it to you until much later." "Then why did you?" "Because I couldn't stand it any longer." "Stand what?" "I thought that I had seen everything one could see, and that there was nothing I could not stand seeing. But when they took Rearden Medal away from you, it was too much, even for me. I know that you don't need this gold at present. What you need is the justice which it represents, and the knowledge that there are men who care for justice." Struggling not to give in to an emotion which he felt rising through his bewilderment, past all his doubts, Rearden tried to study the man's face, searching for some clue to help him understand. But the face had no expression. It had not changed once while speaking. It looked as if the man had lost the capacity to feel long ago, and what remained of him were only features that seemed implacable and dead. With a shudder of astonishment, Rearden found himself thinking that it was not the face of a man, but of an avenging angel. "Why did you care?" asked Rearden. "What do I mean to you?" "Much more than you have reason to suspect, and I have a friend to whom you mean much more than you will ever learn. He would have given anything to stand by you today, but he can't come to you, so I came in his place." "What friend?" "I prefer not to name him." "Did you say that you've spent a long time collecting this money for me?" "I have collected much more than this." He pointed at the gold. "I am holding in your name, and I will return it over to you when the time comes. It is only a sample, as proof that it does exist, and if you reach the day when you find yourself robbed of the last of your fortune, I want you to remember that you have a large bank account waiting for you." "What account?" "If you try to think of all the money that has been taken from you by force, you will know that your account represents a considerable sum." "How did you collect it? Where did this gold come from?" "It was taken from those who robbed you." "Taken by whom?" "By me." "Who are you?" "Ragnar Danneskjold." Rearden looked at him for a long, still moment, then let the gold fall out of his hands. Danneskjold's eyes did not follow it to the ground, but remained fixed on Rearden with no change of expression. "Would you rather I were a law-abiding citizen, Mr. Rearden? If so, which law should I abide by? Directive 10289? "Ragnar Danneskjold," said Rearden, as if he were seeing the whole of the past decade, as if he were looking at the enormity of a crime spread through 10 years and held within 2 words. "Look more carefully, Mr. Rearden. There are only 2 modes of living left to us today: to be a looter who robs disarmed victims, or to be a victim who works for the benefit of his own despoilers. I did not choose to be either. You chose to live by means of force like the rest of them. Yes, openly, honestly, if you will. I do not rob men who are tied and gagged. I do not demand that my victims help me. I do not tell them that I am acting for their own good. I stake my life in every encounter with men, and they have a chance to match their guns and their brains against mine in fair battle. Fair? Well, it's I against the organized strength, the guns, the planes, the battleships of 5 continents. If it's a moral judgment that you wish to pronounce, Mr. Rearden, then who is the man of higher morality? I or Wesley Mouch?" "I have no answer to give you," said Rearden, his voice low. "Why should you be shocked, Mr. Rearden? I am merely complying with a system which my fellow men have established. If they believe that force is the proper means to deal with one another, I am giving them what they ask for. If they believe that the purpose of my life is to serve them, let them try to enforce their creed. If they believe that my mind is their property, let them come and get it." "But what sort of life have you chosen? To what purpose are you giving your mind?" "To the cause of my love." "Which is what?" "Justice." "Served by being a pirate?" "By working for the day when I won't have to be a pirate any longer." "And which day is that?" "The day when you'll be free to make a profit on Rearden metal." "Oh God!" said Rearden, laughing, his voice desperate. "Is that your ambition?" Danneskjold's face did not change. "It is." "Do you expect to live to see that day?" "Yes, don't you?" "No." "Then what are you looking forward to, Mr. Rearden?" "Nothing." "What are you working for?" Rearden glanced at him. "Why do you ask that?" "To make you understand why I am not." "Don't expect me to approve of a criminal." "I don't expect it, but there are a few things I want to help you to see." "Even if it's true, the things you said, why did you choose to be a bandit? Why did you not just simply step out like—" He stopped. "Like Alice Wyatt, Mr. Rearden? Like Andrew Stockton? Like your friend, Ken Danneskjold?" "Yes!" "Would you approve of that?" I... He stopped, shocked by his own words. The shock that came next was to see Danneskjold smile. It was like seeing the first green of spring on the sculptured plains of an iceberg. Rearden realized suddenly for the first time that Danneskjold's face was more than handsome, that it had the startling beauty of physical perfection, the hard, proud features, the scornful mouth of a Viking statue. Yet he had not been aware of it, almost as if the dead sternness of the face had forbidden the impertinence of an appraisal. But the smile was brilliantly alive. "I do approve of it, Mr. Rearden, but I have chosen a special mission of my own. I am after a man whom I want to destroy. He died many centuries ago, but until the last trace of him is wiped out of man's mind, he will not have a decent world to live in." "What man?" "Robin Hood." Rearden looked at him blankly, not understanding. "He was the man who robbed the rich and gave to the poor. Well, I am the man who robs the poor and gives it to the rich, or, to be exact, the man who robs the thieving poor and gives back to the productive rich." "What in blazes do you mean?" "If you remember the stories you've read about me in the newspapers, before they stopped printing them, you know that I have never robbed a private ship and never taken any private property. Nor have I ever robbed a military vessel, because the purpose of a military fleet is to protect from violence the citizens who paid for it, which is the proper function of a government. But I have seized every loot carrier that came within the range of my guns, every government relief ship, subsidy ship, loan ship, gift ship, every vessel with a cargo of goods taken by force from men for the unpaid and unearned benefit of others. I seized the boats that sailed under the flag of the idea which I am fighting, the idea that need is a sacred idol requiring human sacrifices, that the need of some man is the knife of a guillotine hanging over others, that all of us must live with our work, our hopes, our plans, our effort, at the mercy of the moment when that knife will descend upon us, and that the extent of our ability is the extent of our danger, so that success will bring our heads down on the block, while failure will give us the right to pull the cord. That is the horror which Robin Hood immortalized as an ideal of righteousness. It is said that he fought against the looting rulers and returned the loot to those who had been robbed, but that is not the meaning of the legend which has survived. It is remembered not as a champion of property, but as a champion of need, not as a defender of the robbed, but as a provider for the poor. He is held to be the first man who assumed a halo of virtue by practicing charity with the wealth which he did not own, by giving away goods which he had not produced, by making others pay for the luxury of his pity. He is the man who became the symbol of the idea that need, not achievement, is the source of rights, that we don't have to produce, only to want, that the earned does not belong to us, but the unearned does. He became a justification for every mediocrity who, unable to make his own living, has demanded the power to dispose of the property of his betters, by proclaiming his willingness to devote his life to his inferiors at the price of robbing his superiors. It is the foulest of creatures, the double parasite who lives on the source of the poor and the blood of the rich, whom men have become to regard as a moral ideal. And this has brought us to a world where the more a man produces, the closer he comes to the loss of all of his rights, until, if his ability is great enough, he becomes a rightless creature, delivered as prey to any claimant, while in order to be placed above rights, above principles, and above morality, placed where anything is permitted to him, even plunder and murder, all a man has to do is to be in need. Do you wonder why the world is collapsing around us? That is what I am fighting, Mr. Rearden. Until men learn that all of human symbols, Robin Hood, is the most immoral and the most contemptible, there will be no justice on earth and no way for mankind to survive. Rearden listened, feeling numb, but under the numbness, like the first thrust of a seed breaking through, he felt an emotion he could not identify, except that it seemed familiar, very distant, like something experienced and renounced long ago. What I actually am, Mr. Rearden, is a policeman. It's a policeman's duty to protect men from criminals. Criminals being those who seize wealth by force. This is a policeman's duty, to retrieve stolen property and to return it to its owners. But when robbery becomes the purpose of the law, and the policeman's duty becomes not protection, but the plunder of the property, then it is the outlaw who has to become the policeman. I have been selling the cargoes I retrieved to some special customers of mine in this country who pay me in gold. Also, I have been selling my cargoes to the smugglers and the black market traders of the people's states of Europe. Do you know the conditions of existence in those people's states? Since production and trade, not violence, were discredited to crimes, the best men of Europe had no choice but to become criminals. The slave drivers in those states are kept in power by the handouts from their fellow looters in countries not yet fully drained, such as this country. I do not let the handouts reach them. I sell the goods to Europe's lawbreakers at the highest price I can get, and I make them pay me in gold. Gold is the objective value. That means of preserving one's wealth and one's future. Nobody is permitted to have gold in Europe except the whip-wielding friends of humanity who claim that they spend it for the welfare of their victims. That is the gold which my smuggler customers obtain to pay me. How? By the same method I used to obtain the goods. And then I return the gold to those from whom the goods were stolen, to you, Mr. Rearden, and to other men like you. Rearden grasped the nature of the emotion he had forgotten. It was the emotion he had felt when, at the age of 14, he had looked at his first paycheck. When at the age of 24, he had been made superintendent of the ore mines. When, as the owner of the ore mines, he had placed in his own name his first order for new equipment from the best concern in the time, 20th Century Motors. An emotion of solemn, joyous excitement, the sense of winning his place in a world he respected and earning the recognition of men he admired. For almost 2 decades, that emotion had been buried under the mound of wreckage, as the years had added layer upon gray layer of contempt, of indignation, of his struggle not to look around him, not to see those he dealt with, not to expect anything from men, and to keep, as a private vision within the 4 walls of his office, the sense of that world into which he had hoped to rise. Yet, there it was again, breaking through from under the wreckage, that feeling of quickened interest, of listening to the luminous voice of reason, with which one could communicate and deal and live. But it was the voice of a pirate speaking about acts of violence, offering his substitute for his word of reason and justice. He could not accept it. He could not lose whatever remnant of his vision was still retained. He listened, wishing he could escape, yet knowing that he would not miss a word of it. I deposit the gold in a bank, in a gold standard bank, Mr. Rearden, to the account of men who are its rightful owners. They are the men of the superlative ability who made their fortunes by personal effort, in free trade, using no compulsion, no help from the government. They are the great victims who have contributed the most and suffered the worst injustice in return. Their names are written in my book of restitution. Every load of gold which I bring back is delivered among them and deposited to their accounts. Who are they? You are one of them, Mr. Rearden. I cannot commute all the money that has been extorted from you, in hidden taxes, in regulations, in wasted time, in lost effort, in energy spent to overcome artificial obstacles. I cannot commute the sum, but if you wish to see its magnitude, look around you. The extent of the misery now spreading through this once prosperous country is the extent of the injustice which you have suffered. If men refuse to pay the debt they owe you, this is the manner in which they will pay for it. But there is no part of the debt which is commuted or on record. That is the part which I have made it my purpose to collect and return to you. What is that? Your income tax, Mr. Rearden. What? Your income tax, for the last 12 years. You intend to refund that? In full and in gold, Mr. Rearden. Rearden burst out laughing. He laughed like a young boy, in simple amusement, in enjoyment of the incredible. Good God! You are a policeman and a collector of internal revenue too? Yes, said Danneskjold gravely. You are not serious about this, are you? Do I look as if I am joking? But this is preposterous. Any more preposterous than Directive 10289? It's not real or possible. Is only evil real and possible? But are you thinking that death and taxes are our only certainty, Mr. Rearden? Well, there is nothing I can do about the first. But if I lift the burden of the second, men might learn to see the connection between the two of them, and what a longer, happier life they would have the power to achieve. They might learn to hold not death and taxes, but life and production as their two absolutes and as the base of their moral code. Rearden looked at him, not smiling. The tall, slim figure, with the windbreaker stressing its strained, muscular agility, was that of a highwayman. The stern, marble face was that of a judge. The dry, clear voice was that of an efficient bookkeeper. The looters are not the only ones who have kept records on you, Mr. Rearden. So have I. I have in my files copies of all your income tax returns for the last 12 years, as well as all the returns of all my other clients. I have friends in some astonishing places who obtain the copies I need. I divide the money among my clients in proportion to the sums extorted from them. Most of my accounts have now been paid to their owners. Yours is the largest one left to settle. On the day when you will be ready to claim it, the day when I'll know that no penny of it will go back to support the looters, I will turn your account over to you. Until then, he glanced down at the gold on the ground. Pick it up, Mr. Rearden. It's not stolen. It's yours. Rearden would not move or answer or look down. Much more than that lies in the bank, in your name. What bank? Do you remember Midas Mulligan of Chicago? Yes, of course. All my accounts are deposited at the Mulligan Bank. There is no Mulligan Bank in Chicago. It is not in Chicago. Rearden let a moment pass. Where is it? I think that you will know before long, Mr. Rearden, but I cannot tell you now. He added, I must tell you, however, that I am the only one responsible for the undertaking. It is my own personal mission. No one is involved in it but me and the man on my ship. Even my banker has no part in it, except for keeping the money I deposit. Many of my friends do not approve of the course I've chosen. But we all choose different ways to fight the same battle, and this is mine. Rearden smiled contemptuously. Aren't you one of those damn altruists who spends their time on a non-profit venture and risks his life merely to serve others? No, Mr. Rearden. I'm investing in my time and in my own future. When we are free and have to start rebuilding from out of the ruins, I want to see the world reborn as fast as possible. If there is, then, some working capital in the right hands, in the hands of our best, our most productive man, it will save years for the rest of us and, incidentally, centuries for the history of this country. Did you ask what it meant to me? Everything I admire, everything I want to be on the day when the earth will have a place for such state of being. Everything I want to deal with, even if this is the only way I can deal with you and be the only use to you at present. Why? Whispered Rearden. Because my only love, the only value I care to live for, is that which has never been loved by the world, has never won recognition or friends or defenders, human ability. That is the love I am serving, and if I should lose my life, to what better purpose could I give it? The man who had lost the capacity to feel, thought Rearden, and knew that the austerity of the marble face was the form of disciplined capacity to feel too deeply. The even voice was continuing dispassionately. I wanted you to know this. I wanted you to know it now, when it most seemed to you that you are abandoned at the bottom of a pit among subhuman creatures, who are all that's left of mankind. I wanted you to know, in your most hopeless hour, that the day of deliverance is much closer than you think. And there was one special reason why I had to speak to you and tell you my secret ahead of the proper time. Have you heard of what happened to Orrin Boyle's steel mills on the coast of Maine? Yes, said Rearden, and was shocked to hear that the words came as a gasp out of a sudden jolt of eagerness within him. I didn't know whether it was true. It is true, Mr. Rearden. I did it. Mr. Boyle is not going to manufacture Rearden metal at the coast of Maine. He is not going to manufacture it anywhere. Neither is any other looting louse who thinks that a directive can give him a right to your brain. Whoever attempts to produce that metal will find his furnaces blown up, his machinery blasted, his shipments wrecked, his plant set on fire. So many things will happen to any man who tries it that people will say that there's a curse on it, and there will soon be no worker in the country willing to enter the plant of any new producer of Rearden metal. If men like Boyle think that force is all they need to rob their betters, let them see what happens when one of their betters chooses to resort to force. I wanted to let you know, Mr. Rearden, that no one of them will produce your metal or make any penny on it. Because he felt an exultant desire to laugh, as he had laughed at the news of Wyatt's fire, as he had laughed at the crash of Danconia Copper, and knew that if he did, the thing he feared would hold him, would not release him this time, and he would never see his mills again. Rearden drew back and, for a moment, kept his lips closed tight to utter no sound. When the moment was over, he said quietly, his voice firm and dead, "Take that gold of yours and get away from me. I won't accept the help of a criminal." Danneskjold's face showed no reaction. "I cannot force you to accept the gold, Mr. Rearden, but I will not take it back. You may leave it lying here if you wish. It's yours." "I don't want your help, and I don't intend to protect you. If I were within reach of a phone, I would call the police. I would and I will if you ever attempt to approach me again. I'll do it in self-protection." "I understand exactly what you mean. You know, because I've listened to you, because you've seen me eager to hear it, that I haven't damned you as I should. I can't damn you or anyone else. There are no standards left for man to live by, so I don't care to judge anything they do today or in whatever manner they attempt to endure the unendurable. If this is your manner, I will let you go. The hell in your own way, but I want no part of it. Neither as your inspiration nor as your accomplice. Don't expect me to ever accept your bank account, if it does exist. Spend it on some extra armor plate for yourself, because I'm going to report this to the police and give them every clue so they can set them on your trail." Danneskjold did not move or answer. A freight train was rolling by, somewhere in the distance in darkness. They could not see it, but they heard the pounding beat of wheels filling the silence, and it seemed close, as if a disembodied train reduced to a long string of sound were going past them in the night. "You wanted to help me in my most hopeless hour?" said Rearden. "If I am brought to where my only defender is a pirate, then I don't care to be defended any longer. You speak some remnant of human language, so in the name of that, I'll tell you that I have no hope left. But I have the knowledge that when the end comes, I will have lived by my own standards, even while I was the only one to whom they really remained valid. I will have lived in a world in which I started, and I will not go down with that last of it. I don't think you'll want to understand me, but..." A beam of light hit them with a violence as a physical blow. The clangor of a train had swallowed the noise of the motor, and they had not heard the approach of the car swept out of the side road, far behind from the farmhouse. They were not in the car's path, yet they had heard the screech of brakes behind the two headlights, pulling an invisible shape to stop. It was Rearden who jumped back involuntarily and had time to marvel at his companion. The swiftness of Danneskjold's self-control was that he did not move. It was a police car and it stopped beside them. The driver leaned out. "Oh, it's you, Mr. Rearden," he said, touching his fingers to his cap. "Evening, sir." "Hello," said Rearden, fighting to control the unnatural abruptness of his voice. There were two patrolmen in the front seat of the car, and their faces had a tight look of purpose, not the look of their usual friendly intention to stop for a chat. "Mr. Rearden, did you walk from the mills by way the edge road past Blacksmith Cove?" "Yes, why?" "Did you happen to see a man anywhere around these parts, stranger moving along in a hurry?" "Where?" "He'd be either on foot or in a battered wreck of a car. It's got $1 million motor." "What man?" "A tall man with blonde hair." "Who is he?" "You wouldn't believe it if I told you, Mr. Rearden. Did you see him?" Rearden was not aware of his own questions, only of the astonishing fact that he was able to force sounds past some beating barrier inside his throat. He was looking straight at the policeman, but he felt as if the focus of his eyes had switched to his sight vision, and what he saw most clearly was Danneskjold's face watching him with no expression, with no lines, no muscles worth of feeling. He saw Danneskjold's arms hanging idly by his sides, and hands relaxed with no sign of intention to reach for a weapon, leaving the tall, straight body defenseless and open as to a firing squad. He saw in the light that the face looked younger than he had thought, and that the eyes were sky blue. He felt that his one danger would be to glance directly at Danneskjold, and he kept his eyes on the policeman, on the brass buttons of his blue uniform, but the objects filling his consciousness more carefully than a visual perception was Danneskjold's body, the naked body under the clothes, the body that would be wiped out of existence. He did not hear his own words, because he kept hearing the single sentence in his mind without context, except the feeling that it was the only thing that mattered to him in the world. "If I should lose my life, to what better purpose could I give it?" "Did you see him, Mr. Rearden?" "No," said Rearden. "I didn't." The policeman shrugged regretfully and closed his hands around the steering wheel. "You didn't see any man that looked suspicious?" "No." "Nor any strange car passing you on the road?" "No." The policeman reached for the starter. "They got word that he'd been seen ashore in these parts tonight, and they've thrown a dragnet over 5 counties. You're not supposed to mention his name, not to scare the folks, but he's a man whose head is worth $3 million in rewards from all over the world." He had pressed the starter and the motor was churning the air with bright cracks of sound when the second policeman leaned forward. He had been looking at the blonde hair under Danneskjold's cap. "Who's that, Mr. Rearden?" he asked. "My new bodyguard," said Rearden. "Oh, a sensible precaution, Mr. Rearden. In times like these. Good night, sir." The motor jerked forward. The red taillights of the car went shrinking down the road. Danneskjold watched it go, then glanced pointedly at Rearden's right hand. Rearden realized that he had stopped facing the policeman with his hand clutching the gun in his pocket, and that he had been prepared to use it. He opened his fingers and drew his hand out hastily. Danneskjold smiled. It was a smile of radiant amusement, the silent laughter of a clear young spirit greeting a moment it was glad to have lived. And although the two did not resemble each other, the smile made Rearden think of Francisco d'Anconia. "You haven't told a lie," said Ragnar Danneskjold. "Your bodyguard, that's what I am, and what I'll deserve to be in many more ways than you can know at present. Thanks, Mr. Rearden, and so long. We'll meet again much sooner than I had hoped." He was gone before Rearden could answer. He vanished beyond the stone fence as abruptly and soundlessly as he had come. When Rearden turned to look through the armed field, there was no trace of him, and no sign of movement anywhere in the darkness.